Hi everybody, it's Sarah Cray and I teach watercolor, and today we are doing our Rembrandt landscape.
Ooh.
We have Michael here working the cameras.
Hello.
And Michael hasn't filmed with us for a bit. Keenan is taking vacation with his family. We're so happy for him. We'll miss him, but we're grateful for Michael to step in.
Oh, thank you.
And he's filmed with us before, but it has been a while.
Also, we're married.
Oh, this is my husband, my actual husband. So thank you for being here, my dear.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we are going to do this project in 6 steps. So our very first step is we are going to put in our sky and our water wash. Our second step is we're going to put in all of the foliage at once. So our background, our midground, and our foreground. Our third step is we're going to put in our tree and the shadows on our water. Our fourth step is we're going to do that all again. And then our fifth step is we're going to do that all again. And then our very last step is just finishing details, okay? Now, before we get into painting, I just want to say that the whole purpose of this project is that Rembrandt was known for having dramatic lighting. So we really are doing layer and layer on layer to darken our values while leaving kind of this central area alone so we can create a contrast within our values, which is kind of what he is known for. There's a term for that called chiaroscuro. And it was actually influenced by Caravaggio, who is an Italian painter, but I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So why don't we do the oath, and then we will get into painting, okay? So if you can raise your right hand and repeat after me. I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise to be kind to myself.
I promise not to compare my work.
I promise not to compare my work.
And I promise to have fun.
And I promise to have fun.
Thank you. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to sketch our landscape. Now, before we get started, I just want to say that this landscape is not based off of one of Rembrandt's paintings specifically. He really did mostly portraiture, and there are a few landscapes that he has done, but there's not like a lot to choose from. So I looked at a couple, and then I was just like, let's just make this up. So the ones that I looked at, there's one called the Stone Bridge, and the other one is Landscape with Parable of Good Samaritan, and in it he had a tree. Both of them have like very strong tree in each one, so that's why I did a tree. All of that is to say you can make this look however you want. You don't have to follow what I'm doing. I'm literally making it up. It's not based off a specific painting, so feel free to make adjustments of whatever you feel comfortable doing. Okay, so looking at my reference photo here, I'm going to put my ground in. And I'm gonna sketch a little bit darker so you guys can see what I'm doing. But for you guys at home, try and sketch as lightly as possible because watercolor is transparent. So I put in my horizon line and I have some foliage here. And you can see I'm scribbling. Sketching does not have to be this perfect line drawing of no mistakes. I'm just like messily putting stuff in. And maybe up here, we got another mountain, and we're gonna have our foreground little outcropping here. And I'm gonna have another little outcropping here. Now I know in my reference photo, these are kind of essentially the same length. And then I didn't like that, so I added this rock here to make that go in a little bit more. So just kind of be aware of where things are lining up and try and mess it up. And then for my tree, I want to make sure that my tree like kind of goes across my entire composition. And trunks are essentially just parallel lines that eventually meet up. And trees are wonky, okay? So don't stress too much about okay, and I'm only doing this for a few seconds. I'm reminding myself to put leaves here. And then when I get to painting, that's where you kind of tighten things up, where you're just like, oh, I actually want this to be a little bit thicker. And I also want to acknowledge that drawing and sketching is a skill. It takes practice and time, and if you're not comfortable with it, you just got to do it more, and that will come. The second thing is that if you're really intimidated by drawing, don't think of it as drawing, think of it as making marks on a paper, and don't pay attention to, I'm trying to recreate a tree, think, what shape do I see here? And then just recreate that shape. So like we got a rectangle. Okay, I'll put in a rectangle. Then we got like a thinner rectangle. So like break it down into basic shapes and just make those marks on that page. And that's gonna be much easier for you to do any sort of drawing or sketching. Because then it's not like this, I'm trying to sketch a landscape thing, okay? Okay, I feel pretty good about that. That's enough for me to go off of. Bye. Okay, so I'm gonna do my sky and my water. And for the sky and the water, I started off with some like really pretty pinky, peach, blue, purpley colors. And then I just like layer it and layer it and layer it to make it kind of messy. And the reason why I do that is because one, I really am trying to capture the different values. We want to make sure that we have a lot of contrasting values. And the other thing is when I was looking at his work, there was this element there where I felt like if you looked at an area close up, you were like, I don't even understand what's happening in this painting. But if you look at it from far away, you're like, oh, that's a tree. Okay, I get that. So we're really embracing that aspect when it comes to this project, where I'm not gonna be super particular about brush strokes. I'm not gonna be like, we gotta render out this tree perfectly. It's not about that. Really what I'm focusing on is just like my values and getting a general idea of what this looks like. And look at this painting from far away. When you look at it close, you're gonna be like, this is weird. Looking at it from far away, you're gonna be like, well, yeah, I painted that all day. Have
you seen a Rembrandt in real life?
I have seen a Rembrandt in real life, actually.
Big or small?
The Rembrandt I saw in real life, if I remember correctly, I feel like it was in a museum in Sacramento.
Okay.
And it was a portrait. But that's all I remember. I just remember looking at the name and being like, oh my gosh, that's a Rembrandt, you know?
I think a lot of times when I see real famous paintings in real life, I'm always surprised because they're usually smaller than I think.
Oh yeah.
The exception are some Monets, which are huge.
Oh yes, Monets are.
But yeah, we recently saw The Starry, Starry Night in New York, and I was like, oh, I thought this would be a mural.
No, we literally missed it, actually. Yeah, we only went back because I think I shared the story when we were doing our Starry Night project, but we were in the gift shop and I saw all these Starry Night paintings and I was just like, wait a second, they usually only sell merch of things that they have in the museum. And I'm like, wait a second, is Starry Night in this museum? We had to ask a security guard. She was like, yes, it's on the 5th floor. And that's where all the people were. And that's where all the crowds were and the really famous paintings were. So we missed that floor.
There's like a whole Picasso section up there too that we missed. We missed the whole good part of the museum.
Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna grab a little bit of my blue and I'm gonna add water to it to lighten its value. And I'm going to do a blue sky. And then while it's still wet, I'm gonna drop in like a purpley pink cotton candy clouds. And then I'm gonna immediately go into my water. I'm gonna work fairly quickly because I want to use the wet on wet technique. And it works best if you just like work quick. And remember, we're gonna paint like 3 layers on top of this. So don't stress, really just like put it down and move on, okay? So I'm gonna grab my Azure and I'm gonna use my round 12, it's just a larger brush. I did not swatch my colors. I just realized. Let me do my sky and then I will do that. So I'm adding and I'm dragging it down. So I'm getting kind of like this really light blue color here.
It feels so unintuitive to me to just paint over the tree like that, just to wash over it.
Just paint over it, yep. And then we're gonna take a little bit of the fuchsia and a little bit of my yellow and maybe a little bit of violet. I'm going for like really soft cotton candy clouds. And then I'm just gonna like start putting them in, like just drop the color in with my round 12 and let them kind of move and do their own thing. This one I added a little bit more yellow to get kind of like a pastel-y color. And let's maybe add some over here. But when you do this in a wet paper, the the color just kind of blends out and really gives you that soft cloud feel, okay? And that's all we're gonna do for right now. And the colors that I'm using, sorry I didn't swatch them. I'm gonna do that right now. I have honey brown. I have lemon yellow. I have fuchsia. I have violet. And I have azure blue. Okay, 5 colors. So we're gonna do a lot of color mixing today. And I have 4 paintbrushes. I have my round 2, round 6, round 12, and wash, 1-inch wash. But please just use whatever you have. And I cut my paper in half and taped it using my Holbein soft tape, which is my favorite tape. And if you'll notice here, actually, if you purchase this box, we have our brush cleaner is what that thing is. If you're like, what is this paint puck?
Hold it up.
Well, my water's green now. But you put the paint puck, suction cup it to the bottom of your water cup, and that way it has these like soft bumps that makes it super easy to clean your brush, which I thought was super cool. I actually really love this item. So I hope you guys love it too and like it. Okay, great.
You ever had a grandparent with dentures?
Yeah.
That's what that reminds me of.
Especially that like pink color. I chose that color, dang it. Okay, now we're going to move on to the water, and essentially I'm gonna just do a reflection of the sky, and I'm gonna stay within kind of like this pinky, peachy color. So if I were to kind of reverse flip it, here we have a light blue with peachy tones, and then as it goes up, if we're doing a mirror flip, it's gonna get more blue and have more purple clouds, okay? So I'm gonna grab my blue and do the opposite, basically, go in the opposite way. And I'm just gonna paint over everything. And I know that in watercolor, you know, you can't lighten an area once you already paint it. So usually you have to like paint around stuff. But for this project, because we're doing so many layers, you can just paint directly over it. I am gonna avoid the foliage areas though. Okay, I'm gonna grab some pink yellow and kind of put these cloud reflections in. Okay, and the purple one would kind of be more up here. And other peachy pink over here a little bit. And again, we're gonna cover a lot of this up, but isn't it so pretty right now? Okay, that was step 1. Now what we're going to do is we are gonna start putting in our foliage on our background, midground, and foreground. So I'm gonna mix some greens. So we have a few different ways that we can mix green here. We have lemon yellow, which is a very vibrant yellow, and our azure blue. That mixed together is gonna create a very, let me flip my palette, a very vibrant green, okay? And I wanna go for more like earthy, desaturated tones. So whenever you're trying to desaturate colors, the best thing to do is add its complement. So the complement of green is red, and fuchsia, we don't have red, but we have fuchsia, and fuchsia is acting as our red. So I'm gonna add that in there, and that's gonna make like a gray green. And then if you wanna warm it up, throw a little bit of this honey in there. And now I have this kind of olivey green. You can also just mix your azure and the honey together. And I personally like that green better than the azure with the lemon.
I've watched you do this for 15 years and it's still witchcraft to me.
Mixing colors?
Just, yeah, you can just like have an idea and just like color.
It just comes with, I don't know, practice.
Yeah. Well, this is your third time painting ever, right?
Ever.
It's incredible.
Okay, so I grabbed some blue. I grabbed a little bit of purple and pink and honey just to see what kind of green I get. And sometimes it's just experimenting where you're just like, and that's why I don't give you guys exact color mixing recipes, because one, color mixing is the one true way to get your artistic voice in your painting. So embrace whatever colors you mix and that you like, because you get to make those decisions wholeheartedly. That is your inner artist coming out. So I like giving you that freedom. And then so much of it is just kind of exploring where you're just like, hey, I kind of want this muddier. Like these greens feel cool, but they're all really similar. So what if I do like more brown in one of my greens? To do more brown, I'm going to take more red or fuchsia, and now I have a brown green. Okay, so like get a few different greens going and then just like pull from those as you're painting. All right, so I'm gonna do my like kind of misty foliage first, which means I need a lighter value. So I'm gonna take one of these greens and just add water to it. It doesn't really matter which one, whatever one you like, whatever one is your favorite.
While we're on the topic of paint color mixing, you keep going.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about our museum visits, and I remember this one room that had a bunch of different artists from the same area and time period, and you could see in their paintings that they used the same color. Mm-hmm. And there was a plaque that said that like there was a paint maker in the area, and he'd like come out with new seasonal colors or whatever. And all the artists in the area used it. It was this really bright red.
That is so cool,
Isn't
and that
funny?
actually makes a lot of sense. That is very cool.
So
I missed that.
They used like the same paint supplier, you know, but it was in the 1500s.
Yeah, and that's why there's like these commonalities in colors and so you can see here I'm just putting in my background mountain with a light value, okay? And you can make it go across the entire thing. I'm gonna have it kind of end here. The other thing about color is actually informed by our society. There are popular colors. You know that like there are seasons of colors, not only from like a seasonal standpoint, but like from home decor, fashion, all of these things. Colors are chosen by people and they decide, okay, in the year 2025, the hot colors are going to be these 3 colors. And then that way, all these people that create products for your house, for your clothes, for your decor, for your notebooks, they then know what colors to use. It's fascinating.
It's like an actual panel of people.
Yes, people choose it. I know. Isn't everything a lie?
It sounds like a conspiracy.
You think you like blush, but people chose that you liked blush.
It is funny when you look back. I make this comment all the time that like, oh, that looks like 2009 Target.
Yep.
Just being a joke. You know, I don't remember what really 2009 Target looked like, but
yeah,
it is weird that they color collect like that.
I mean, I'm pretty sure it's a panel of people. Maybe I just made that up, but
No,
I feel like
I know what you're talking about.
I feel like I heard that. Okay, so I'm gonna start doing my midground and I'm gonna add yellows to my greens because for me, I want this to be a little bit like messy, and I really love like while things are wet, what happens if I drop in some blue? Especially with my greens. I love greens because I can drop in yellows and I can drop in blues and I can drop in browns, and I just let it move and kind of do its own thing. Now the trickiest thing is trying to get these lines kind of straight. They don't have to be perfectly straight, but just kind of like overall.
I'm still stuck on the color committee. How do you get that job?
I don't know, but I will find out. And that will be my job. No, I'm kidding. And this could possibly like go up a little bit more because this is in our midground and a little bit closer to us. You can start to make out like smaller shapes a little bit better. But again, we're going for the overall look and not so much going for detail. So just kind of like embrace different brush marks and brush strokes.
It's so funny looking at the finish. You would have no idea that it had this pastel-y base.
I know.
You know?
Yeah.
It's like Easter.
Okay, do you guys want to learn about Rembrandt?
Totally.
Okay, so he was born in the 1600s and he was popular during the Dutch Golden Age, which essentially meant that they just finished fighting in a war, and I believe that they gained their independence. I could be wrong about that, sorry if I am, which meant that they had a little bit more opportunity and wealth than they had before. So at that time, and let me just say right here, as I'm putting in my foreground, I'm just doing honey browns, drops of green. I'm keeping it fairly light because I know I'm going to go back and do more. And then I'm letting my brush strokes kind of like be thin and make these wispy kind of grass. Okay? So at that time, the most famous, there was kind of a hierarchy of genres for paintings. And it's true, I mean, if you look at art movements, the subject matters themselves are part of the art movements and kind of what societally people want to paint. So the most famous, or I guess the most popular ones at that time were historical paintings or allegorical paintings, or which is essentially like religious paintings, was the most popular. The second one was portraits. The third one was genre, everyday life. That's just like daily scenes from your life. Fourth one was landscapes, and the least popular was still lifes. Now, the interesting thing about that area at that time is they were kind of going off script, and the everyday life became really a more popular subject matter, the still lifes, all of that stuff. But Rembrandt actually found success in portraiture. That's what he was known for. He was known for being able to capture expressive expressions. He was able to like capture that humanness, and he really used chiaroscuro as a way to draw. And I just want to show you an example really quick.
You guys, if you ever get the opportunity to go to a museum with Sarah, you're going to have a great time.
This is drying, so I'm going to let this dry before I put in my background. But this is a book I checked out from the library. And so, like, here's one of those paintings. So do you see how extreme the light and dark is in this painting? It gives a very dramatic effect. It also makes it very clear of what you should be looking at. And this is how artists actually used light and contrast to highlight the subject of their painting, where you're just like, these people are really important. This lady is really important. I don't know who she is, but I can just tell. I have no idea what's going on in this painting, but I know as a viewer, the amount of light that's on this woman, she is important to the overall composition and story of whatever he's trying to communicate because of how lit up she is. And so when you go and you look at these paintings and you look at art, pay attention to what areas are your eye drawn to, because the artist did that on purpose. They're trying to tell a story, they're trying to show you something, they're trying to balance a composition, they're trying to highlight different things, they're trying to guide your eye. And light contrast, or just contrast in general, is a very effective tool on how to do that. There was another one here, a self-portrait. He did quite a few self-portraits. So there's Rembrandt, self-portrait. Okay. So when I came to thinking through who we wanted to recreate, I mean, Rembrandt is probably one of the most, it's a household name, I feel, for famous artists. And when I was looking at his work, I was just like, you know, I really don't think I can teach a portrait. Like, I'm not quite there personally, and this is kind of more of a, you know, beginner to intermediate experience, and so I didn't want to, like, you know.
You're telling me you can't mimic on camera a Rembrandt portrait with watercolors?
Listen, I'm not.
You gotta practice.
I can paint, but I can't paint like that. And then I'm gonna do the right-hand side of my mountain. But then I thought, I love painting landscapes, and I know that he wasn't known for them, but I was just like, what if we take these ideas of extreme light and dark, and also looking at how we layered color and looking at expressive brushstrokes and looking at like feeling and stuff, and what if we just try that? So this is kind of what I came up with, but know that you can take these same principles of contrast or chiaroscuro and apply them to anything. You can apply them to portraits, you can apply them to landscapes, still lifes, anything that you want to paint, you can use these same ideas.
Another thing I learned from museums is that you know, an artist is famous for whatever, a portrait or these things, but the reality is these people painted a lot. And they probably painted something in the, like, there's probably a good library of Rembrandt landscapes. They may have been rotted away, but I'm sure he painted a bunch.
He painted a few. And the ones, like here is kind of, this book is called, it's called Art Book Rembrandt. This is kind of my go-to guides for when I'm trying to just look at artists, because it does a good overview of the context of where they came from and their work. But yeah, here are some of his still lifes. You can see that, like, these are just dead animals. I wonder why it wasn't so popular. No, just kidding. But
just a nice dead animal in your living room.
And actually, can I see the close-up so I can make sure that they can see this image?
Oh, shoot, right there.
I'll lay that. Okay, so you guys can kind of see that landscape. It's a bit glary, but I want to point out, like, look at these brush strokes. What is this even? Clouds? I don't know. Look at like the hints of different greens and oranges and kind of like really muddy colors.
I mean, but it's beautiful.
I'm not saying bad. I'm saying like this is gorgeous. And look at the highlight right there in the center. Look how light that sky is. So that's kind of what we're going after. We're going to get a lot of muddy, messy around the edges. And then in this center area for our painting, we're going to keep that light value. Okay? So keep that in mind. All right, now we're going to paint our tree. So I mixed a brown, and what I did is I grabbed honey brown, but I needed to darken it because honey brown is actually more like a gold color. So I grabbed violet and fuchsia and mixed that in there. That made it really, maybe a little bit too red. So you can grab some green or a little bit of blue to tone down that redness in the brown. Okay, so here's my brown. And I'm going to start putting in my tree. And I'm just going to paint over what I have so far. And then I always kind of like to put in a line and then just use water and grab color from what's already there. And then what you can do with trees is you can start with pushing down hard pressure, and then as you work your way up, let your pressure lighten and your brush stroke will naturally get thinner, which mimics what trees do. I kind of liked how this had like a curve going out. You see how this one just kind of goes like this and this one kind of curved out. So just acknowledging the differences. I guess I could add it. Let's add it. Why not?
YOLO.
Okay, that looks pretty cool. And then just more branches kind of coming different ways. And then I'm going to start putting in my leaves. So I'm going to start with just kind of like a light value green. So whatever green you want, pick up any green. Add water to it though to make it light. And then kind of where we would see the leaves is where I'm going to. And remember, they grow in front of branches too, right? Because they're three-dimensional objects. So there are branches that are coming out at you, and there are leaves that are growing on that, which means they're going to cover some areas of the trunk and the branches. So go ahead and just paint over branches.
Get some really nerdy tree talk in here.
Okay.
But we had a tree on our property that was exposed to a little bit of a fire a while ago, and it burnt all the leaves off, okay?
Okay.
And something really interesting is happening. The leaves are coming back, but they're growing directly out of the bark.
That is interesting.
So it looks like the branch itself is furry with leaves.
So if you have a furry, leafy tree, that happens.
It happens. It's a walnut tree.
Trees are wonky. Embrace the wonkiness. That's why I love trees. There's a tree that looks like whatever you're painting is somewhere.
Yeah.
It's got to. Okay, so this is at this point, actually let me put my shadow in my water. So we did our tree, and now I'm going to start putting in a shadow right here. So if you think about water, not only would it reflect the sky, it's going to reflect whatever land is right next to it, right? So I'm gonna grab kind of like a purpley, maybe grab a little bit of blue, kind of get a gray color, gray-green. Let's add a little bit of green in there because the foliage is green and that color would be reflected the same as the clouds. And I'm gonna leave a thin white line between my outcropping and my shadow. If you can, if you accidentally just cover it like I just did, it's not a big deal. You're gonna put it in, add water, and kind of just like blend it out and kind of mirror the shape of whatever land you have the same way we did kind of like our clouds. And this has some shadow too. And here a bit. Okay, so now we have our general overview of where all of our pieces are going to go. And at this point, we're just gonna do muddy, messy layer on top of muddy, messy layer to really get the overall chiaroscuro effect that we're going for.
That's such a funky word.
It is a funky word. I'm gonna just use my heated craft tool to let this dry. But if you don't have one of those, let it dry, go get a snack. Make sure your kids are okay.
So, while you're doing this, you're someone who paints more than anyone else I know.
Okay.
When you're out and about, when you're driving your car, do you like think, how could I paint that all the time? Are you thinking that a lot?
Not all the time, but sometimes.
Just when you look at this beautiful face over here, you're just like, oh, how could I paint that man?
Just when I look over and see my husband, I'm like, oh, I must paint him.
Paint him.
You must pose for me. No, but I think that there are definitely moments that catch you off guard that you're not thinking about it. I mean, and it's usually when, and I'm sure this is something that you guys experience, when the clouds are lit up a certain way and you're driving home and you're just like, oh, look at those clouds. Or, I mean, one of my favorite paintings I've ever done was a moonlight painting, and I distinctly remember driving home and it was a full moon, and the amount of light that was coming off that moon on a clear sky and how it lit up the landscape underneath. I could see the reflection so brightly off of the lakes and like houses. And you remember that because you were watching me watch it and you knew that I was paying attention to it. Where you were like, are you thinking about your next painting? And it's just like, yeah. So not all of the time, but absolutely there are times where things just kind of demand your attention. But I think so much of being an artist and really enjoying your life a little bit more is being able to pick up on those like in your everyday. Because every day there is a moment in the day that is beautiful. And sometimes we get so caught up in what we're doing that we forget to just look. And so much of a skill of being an artist is the ability to just stop and see.
I took a photography class in college, and day one, everyone's so excited. They've got their new cameras and they're ready to learn. And our first assignment was to not touch your camera for a week and take pictures in your head. To like go and sit and look at something and be like, this would be a good picture, click. And I think it helped because, like, you know, I dabble in photography compared to your painting, but like I find myself also doing that where I'll see something pretty and compose it in my head.
And so just so you guys know, we're going on to step 4, which is we're doing our muddy layers. So everything that I've painted, I'm just gonna paint over it with muddy browns, greens, blues, like really let go of keeping vibrancy in this painting. We're not going for that. We want it to get kind of like muddy and weird, okay? So embrace the browns. Yeah, I remember actually one of my classes that I took in, one of my favorite classes. It was called Collage and Assemblage. And it's spelled assemblage, but the correct pronunciation is assemblage. Michael, you always make fun of me for that, but that's the correct way to say it. And I was looking at like a installation piece that I was working on, which essentially means it's like 3-dimensional. It's like part of the room. And the entire class period, I set it up and I just sat and I looked. And that sounds so weird. I understand that that sounds woo-woo, but that allowing yourself to stop and notice and take note of the experience, what it is that they're seeing, trying to come at it new. It's part of it. It really is part of it. So like a lot of the times people want to, when they learn to paint, they want to just jump right in, but they didn't, so much of it is stopping to actually observe what your eye is seeing instead of what your brain tells you to see. And I think that that's why there gets a lot of frustration and irritation when people are trying to recreate scenes, is because their brain is telling them one thing, but what we actually see in real life is very different. And you have to kind of allow your brain to separate between these known objects and try and pretend it's something new, because then it's so much easier for your brain to capture what's actually happening. Okay, I'm getting a little too chatty here and I need to get to painting. So I'm just using...
It's my fault, I'm sorry.
No, you're doing great. I just need to use my 6. And here at this point, I can kind of like paint around my branches now that I know that they're here. Like that, that feels pretty good. And then of course, going back into this, embracing blues, greens, browns.
I love the term, it feels too woo-woo.
Embrace the woo-woo. And sometimes what I'll do when I'm feeling a little bit like, oh, well, let's just see what happens here, is when it's wet like this, you can take a 1-inch wash, you can take a 6, whatever brush you have, and just kind of like scribble around, mess it up, smear it.
Any of you viewers from the old days remember when we named the paintbrushes?
Oh.
Keith and Hank?
It's been a while.
And then they were Brock and Keenan for a bit?
Yep. Yep. We used to name our brushes. What would this brush's name be?
Toby.
Toby. That's it. Toby. Okay. And in some of these areas, we're gonna go almost black, and that's okay. Embrace it, that's okay. Just know whatever you're doing, it's okay. Now for me, as I'm looking at where I kind of want my viewer's eye to focus on, I definitely want the water, and I really want this foreground to stick out. The tree is a strong element, and I'm not focusing on a lot of the contrast on the tree. If you actually look at my tree, it's pretty even in value. So where your eye is drawn to is this section. So your eye is kind of looking past this tree and you're kind of immersed into this painting. But I still want the foreground to feel like a foreground. So I want to make sure I do have some highlights and lowlights in there. So this foreground area, I want to have that range of value. And then this section is really where the eye is going to go. Everywhere else, it gets pretty muddy and loose, okay? So as you're painting yours, I want you to think about, okay, where do I want my viewer's eye to go? You can be following me and doing what I'm doing, or maybe you're saying, no, I actually want them to focus on that tree. I really want the main thing to be that tree. If that's the case, you need to kind of even out in values all the other areas and have a strong contrast and light for that tree, and all of a sudden that viewer's eye is going to go right there instead of the water like in mine. Okay, so I'm going to mix like a blue, purple, gray color. I need to start like adding darker values on my water. So I'm using my 6, and let's just paint over what we got. And then as I work my way towards the middle, I'm going to add water, because that's going to just lighten my values in general. And it will save that kind of middle section of my painting to be that kind of light value that I'm hoping. And while it's wet like this, I can drop in, I kind of want it to go from like dark to light from the outside working in. So you can do a couple extra swatches. And you can choose what you want your like main colors to be, right? Like the landscape that I showed you of Rembrandt, that one I felt like was very strong in like oranges. So you can make these decisions. This one is very strong in like greens and blues. But know that it doesn't have to be that. Okay, can we just like take a second and look at how this water is forming already?
Yeah, I was just thinking, I should have trusted you. Look at it's so gorgeous.
You didn't trust me?
I just look like a 1980s workout club.
I know. Well, and it's actually interesting that you say that about trust, because I think that especially for beginners, we don't trust ourselves enough to keep going. We don't trust the process enough to know that we can come out the other side. So halfway through a painting or the first third of a painting, we're looking at this saying, this looks bad, this doesn't look how the end is supposed to look, but we're making a judgment on something before it's done, and we don't trust ourselves enough to know that we'll be able to pull it out at the end. And so I'm here to tell you that give your painting a chance to be something before you decide it's not. And trust yourself to know that a lot of it is just like gathering and layering, and it's just keep on going. Now there are a couple signs, and I'm going to go back into my trees and start doing another layer on my trees. Another common question though that I get is, how do you know when a painting is done, or how do you know that, how do you stop from overworking? Overworking is very, very common. And so what I like to do to kind of help me understand about overworking is I kind of pay attention to how I'm feeling. And I know that sounds so silly, but you know when you're painting along and you're like, yeah, now I'm going to do this layer, and now I'm going to do this layer, and things are going good. And then there are other times where you're painting and you're just starting to get mad. You're starting to get frustrated. You're starting to get huffy. You're starting to feel like the painting is not doing what you want it to do, and so you lift and then you go back in and you're trying to do it and it's still doing it, and you just like start to get mad. That, I think, is when we tend to overwork, because we're trying to fix something without actually seeing what it is that we're trying to fix, or understanding really what problem we're trying to solve. Like, we know that there's something wrong, but we don't know exactly what it is, and so we're just kind of messing with it, hoping that it will kind of grab and fix it. So when you notice that happening, that's when I suggest you take a step back, get a breather, maybe even leave it overnight, and then come back to it. And it will be so much easier for you to see where there needs to be a little bit extra adjustments, to see what's happening in that painting to solve it. But you can only get that if you give yourself space away from your painting. Now, if you're an artist and you're just like, okay, I overwork my paintings, but I'm not mad about it, I just overwork it. So like that advice didn't apply to me, which also happens. If that's the case, then what I suggest you do is you set timers. Setting timers is such an efficient way to improve your skill. And I remember being in art class, and literally there was a person standing in the middle of the room, and our teacher said, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to draw this person. And those paintings aren't great. Like, those drawings aren't awesome. They're not supposed to be, though. It's teaching you how to look at form, shape, line quickly. It's forcing you to make decisions like split second and go for it. And that's a skill. And so then, like, if you notice that you're overworking something and you're just like, I should have just left it. Go look at a painting and say, all right, I'm going to give myself 10 minutes to paint this. And I'm not going to be putting all my value in how this turns out. I'm just going to go for it. And you just do that over and over again. And then all of a sudden, your brush strokes are a little bit more confident. Your decisions, you get faster at making those decisions and can make decisions quickly, and, you know, you'll improve making the right decisions, right? So,
well, I think that's also what separates you as an artist from the vast sea of other artists, is the decisions you make. and training yourself to trust those split-second ones. You know, in my things that I've made, usually the things I make off the cuff, I love the most. The things that I put too much thought into and I'm really overthinking it, they feel like that. So like learning to trust those split-second decisions, I think leads to a more personalized piece of art.
Personalized and free.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, what were you going to say?
I was going to say another thing that I've seen you do to kind of do the quote-unquote step away is to take a picture of it with your phone and then go look at it somewhere else, because that one step of removal, I don't know, does something and lets you see it differently.
It does. Absolutely. Okay, so now I'm going to add some, I've been leaving my sky alone. I need to add some of that like gray color to my sky. So I have my azure. I have like this weird green gray here that I actually kind of like. I'm just going to mix that in. Maybe grab a little bit of purple. Now the thing with the purple is that it's super, super vibrant. All of these colors are vibrant, right? Because they're dye-based. Like just the fact that we're doing the desaturated painting with dye-based paints is kind of amazing, because that's what dye-based paints are for, is their vibrancy. So we're like purposely saying, no, we're gonna do this. So I have like this gray, purple, blue color, and I'm gonna use my 1-inch wash. Okay, that's too dark, I don't like that. And that's okay, this is what you do. You rinse your brush, you get it wet, and you're gonna lift up that color. And I'm gonna scrape the brush on the bottom of my cup to get all that paint off. That's why I like that paint puck. I'm just gonna kind of scrub that up. Okay, so the reason why I didn't like that, it was too gray. I want it to be more blue. So I'm gonna just pick up more blue. There we go. That feels better. And I'm just gonna kind of go across this whole thing. Go into my trees. And it might smear around the colors, that's okay. And I am gonna leave right here, right above this horizon, I'm gonna leave that alone. But everywhere else gets this kind of smeary color. And maybe it goes even a little bit darker. Remember, we're trying to work dark towards light. So on the edges here, okay. And I'm gonna just keep going. I'm gonna do some more water.
I think Rembrandt's one-liner should be like, painted vignette.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, we're totally going for a vignette. And I've always, my own personal style, when I did like landscapes in college, or we would go out into the yard and like paint whatever we saw, I love that vignette, like kind of spotlight look. I always went for it. I felt like it just added something. So I'm a fan of that. But again, that's personal preference. Like maybe you're looking at this and you're just like, no, and that's okay. You don't have to like what everybody else is doing, and it's okay to say no, that's not for you. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I feel pretty happy with my water. I am noticing, if I'm looking at this compared to my reference, that there is a little bit of a lighter color here, and I kind of like how that looks. So sometimes you can go in and lift a little bit of color out. Not a ton, but enough to let the light back in. Maybe along the bottom too. Now we are definitely working this paper, and what I mean by that is we are doing lots of layers of water and paint and scrubbing and all of this stuff. But know that every paper has its limits. So it's possible that some of your papers are starting to kind of degrade a little bit. Mine so far is holding up, but I want to say that that's sometimes part of painting, And you just kind of like whatever paper you have, whatever it can do, each paper is a little bit different, and just like adjust and work towards its limits. And then when it's starting to degrade, you kind of back off a little bit and you're like, okay, all right, paper, sorry, I'll calm down, and just keep painting. And then as you paint more and more, you'll understand your style and you'll know what kind of paper you'll need. Like, for example, a lot of the, you know, essentially teaching myself how to watercolor, I had a very light hand. So wood pulp papers or not 100% cotton papers worked just fine because I wasn't trying to do layers and layers and big landscapes. It was more illustration style in the center of my paper. And so I learned on Canson, which at that time was a $5 pad of watercolor paper from Walmart. And I used that for a lot, for years and years and years, because I'm like, this is serving my purpose. It's great. I don't have any issues with it. But then let's say the more you paint, the more you recognize that you like to do lots of layers, you like to do full paintings, you like to do a lot of water, and you notice that your paper degrades over and over again, well, then maybe you should look at a different paper, because maybe your painting style is one where you need one with a little bit more heft. And I don't think that one is better or worse than the other. I think it's just finding out how to use what you can use.
Different tools, man, that exist for different purposes.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm just kind of going in and putting darker values on my tree. When I smeared around my sky, it kind of evened out all my values on my tree, which isn't bad. I'm okay with that. I just got to go in and put some darks back in. And I kind of like that smeary, soft look. I feel like it's a little bit reminiscent of oil painting. So like sometimes along the edges I'll just smear it a bit, get a lighter value.
I think this is one of my favorite things about like your artist historical collection boxes and stuff is I am impressed at the closeness you achieve with watercolor to like a lot of oil paintings. You know what I mean?
Stop that. Thank you. It's actually fun and quite a challenge to think about, okay, how can I take the feeling of this and recreate it in a watercolor scenario when they're very different mediums and you have to use them in very different ways. But it's a fun challenge. I like it. All right, I'm gonna go in, and this is where I'm gonna kind of switch to my round two. I'm gonna do some longer, thinner grasses here, but I'm noticing that I kind of just did the same mark and the same height, all evenly spaced, because your brain likes to make patterns. So when I do that, I just mess it up on purpose. And then I'll go back in and make it messier. So maybe it's just a few detail lines. It's just kind of hinting at a little bit of the grass. And you can do a little bit of a shadow on your tree on the right-hand side. Just kind of add a little bit of depth on that. I wonder if I could actually lift color on this left-hand side. Let's try it. Just a clean brush with water. And I'm just trying to let a little bit of light into my trunk. So what I'll do is I'll take a damp brush and using just water, I'll do a layer of water on wherever I want the color to be lifted. And I'll leave that for a second. And then I'll take a paper towel and sponge up that water. Excuse me. And look at that. Now I have a little highlight on my tree. Okay. So now I'm going to start going into my midground and my background a little bit. I feel like I I did a lot of like wet on wet here, and this kind of evened out in value. You see that?
Yep.
So I'm going to do that same thing where I'm just going to add water to the top part. Just let it sit there for a second and try and lift up any color that I can. And what I'm trying to do is whenever you have a section of a value that is even, so it's the same light and dark across the whole section, that in itself creates a feeling of smoothness and flatness. And so for me, it's just like, no, I want this to feel like there's lots of trees and bushes and ins and outs and layers. So I need to have some values in there. It doesn't have to be detailed, it doesn't have to be a ton, but more than just the flat even that was there. Okay, got some highlight back in there. I'm gonna let that dry, and then I'll go in with a darker color and kind of define my shoreline and do some little textures there. I'm gonna go ahead, and there's one thing that's kind of bothering me a little bit about this painting, which is my pink cloud is poking through so clearly in my water. And I feel like because we did so many layers, that pink peachy color feels a little bit disconnected to the rest of my painting. I need to do something to kind of tone it down. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little bit of this like blue-gray, and I'm just going to kind of softly go over the pink. There we go.
Perfect.
That's it. I feel like that's good. I don't think I need to add anything else to that. And then this is also where I know we put in our like really misty mountain hill first, but at this point, now that we've put in so many values, where is that mountain? For me, I feel like it's like totally disappeared. And so I just like a little hint of it. So I'm just gonna go in and do kind of like a top and then very quickly blend that out. Maybe grab a little bit of blue. I liked that it was kind of like this blue color. And maybe a hint over here. So it's just like the top poking through. There we go. There it is. And if you want to do it on this side, why not?
Where is this, Sarah?
This landscape?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Tennessee.
Tennessee?
I don't know. Yeah.
What do you guys think? You let us know if you've seen a scene similar. Do I like that? Nah, I don't like that. Let's see if I can lift it out. Maybe just lighten it a bit.
I've never been to upstate New York, but it could be upstate New York.
Ooh, I have a feeling that I would just love upstate New York. Never been.
I'm afraid to go because I don't think I'd leave.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, so I'm feeling pretty good about what's happening here. I love the highlight that I got on my water. Actually, so much so that I'm not going to add this rock here. I don't want to cover that up. I think that it's just really beautiful the way that it is. But what I am going to do is I'm going to just kind of darken my area where my land meets the water. So I'm going to mix all of my colors together. And as you can see on my palette, I just have mud. And that's okay. I'm going to grab some purple, some blue. What color do we have with that? Let's add some honey. Add some more blue, add some more purple. I want like a dark, there we go, really dark, kind of brown. And I'm gonna grab my 6, and if this is dry, just kind of right above the highlight, I'm gonna wanna put this kind of darker edge in. And then maybe take some like green and just do kind of little brush strokes, little texture marks. I'm gonna grab some blue too. And you can do this with a round too if you want it to be a little bit more detailed. This is our midground, so it's not going to be as detailed as our foreground, but you can see like some little outcroppings. We should be able to see some differentiation in the different shapes and colors, values. Doesn't have to be a lot, but just a little. Okay, that feels good. I actually really liked that there was kind of this golden hint on some of the highlights. What I mean by that is seeing these areas where it's like it hasn't really been touched. I'm gonna grab my honey brown and mix that with water to get kind of like this golden color. And in these lighter areas, I'm gonna put that kind of little highlight there. It doesn't have to be a lot, just a little, enough. And if you want to make it warmer, you can add some fuchsia in there. And I'm going to take that same kind of golden color and do some grasses here. Just going to make it pop. Just a little bit. Okay, and then I'm going to take that same dark value and just kind of define my shoreline a little bit more on my background. Doesn't have to be a lot, but sometimes just a little hint of a dark line is enough to separate and give you some dimension. Do the same thing on the right hand side. Okay, that feels pretty good. I'm gonna go in. My tree branch kind of got lost a little bit here when I was doing all my foliage. So when it's nice and dry, you can go back in and just kind of like sharpen it up. Okay, and I think I might do one more on my sky. One more layer. Now this is kind of, we're on our last step here, people. This is us kind of taking a step back from everything that we've painted and thinking, what little adjustments can I make to really finish this off? So I'm going to do a darker edge at the top.
You ever thought about teaching people how to do this?
Never crossed my mind. And my highlight right here on this is too thick. You see how it's competing with right next to her? So when that happens, you just go in and you just thin it. I would still want it, but just a little bit.
You gotta make the noise. You gotta go swoop.
Swoop, 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 swoop.
There, and it's fixed.
And there it's fixed. I also, I'm not mad about the pink behind the tree, but I'm gonna just soften that up just a little bit. So you just kind of do a very light wash of a neutral color over it. And I don't mind a little bit peeking through because I think that speaks really nicely to the water reflection. But I didn't want to see only pink right there. I feel like I can do one more layer of leaf detail on my tree. Now the other thing with Rembrandt too is if you have an opportunity to look through artist work, I mean, even if you're not a portrait artist like he was known for, like you can still be inspired by what artists have done, how they have captured things. And he was known for his portraiture, but he was also a very successful etcher. Is that the word? Let me find it. Here we go. Engravers.
Huh.
So like his sketching, his cross hatching, like look at all of the movement. Let's actually do the close-up. Yeah, look at all of that movement that he could get. He doesn't have color in here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's a great study in form. So he did these, and he was very skilled at these as well. So I guess my point is, like, you can take these elements from these different artists and say, like, yeah, I learned this, or how did they do it? And then you just figure out how you can take that into your own work. And maybe it works sometimes, maybe it doesn't. But the more you learn, the easier it is for you to learn yourself. Does that make sense? Get rid of that. Let's do some more trees.
Take all these things, and you know the old saying, let's make art.
Exactly. He kind of had a sad life, though. His wife died, his kids died. He had a lot of issue with money. I mean, he was very successful for a time. And then he lost it all, which is kind of scary, sad.
Nothing's a guarantee, you know?
Nothing's a guarantee. The best and worst thing, best and worst phrase in the world, this too shall pass.
Yep. Well, on that note.
Okay, I feel pretty good about where we're at. Do I think that I could probably finagle with this a little bit more? Yes, so I'm just going to do a little bit right here. Maybe a little bit more shadow here. But there is our Rembrandt-inspired landscape.
Dang, I like it better than the other one.
The project or the reference?
The reference,
yeah. And this is a really fun thing because we're mixing all of these colors, and because we sketched this, and because we just kind of made the decisions as we went. Everybody's is going to look so different from each other's, and every time you paint in this style, it's going to look different from the one before. And we really want to embrace and celebrate that aspect, because what that is doing is you're interjecting your artistic voice in your painting. You're giving yourself permission to make decisions. And sometimes we're scared. Is this the right decision? Should I put this here? I wish someone was here to tell me if this would mess up my composition. But the best way to learn is to do. And I know that you guys can do this. And I can't wait to see how they turn out and how they're all gonna look different from each other. I really hope that you learn a bit about Rembrandt and how he approached paintings and kind of that style of moodiness and dark and light, and using light as a way to point our subject or point our viewer's eye to the subject of our painting, and kind of use that as a compositional tool within our work. So thank you so much for painting with me. If you're on Instagram, you can tag us in what you're painting. That is #Let'sMakeArt, or tag us at Let's Go Make Art. And if you're in the Facebook group, you can not only share your work, but you can see what other people are painting too, which again is a great tool in learning and education. That's called Let's Make Art Watercolor. So not only are you kind of learning how to do this, you got a whole community of people that's on your side helping you out. I think that group is almost 60,000 members. So it's large, and that can be intimidating, but know that every person there is cheering you on, and that sometimes makes it a bit easier to do hard things. So thank you so much for being with me. Michael, thank you for being yourself.
Anytime.
And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.
Bye.